European Figurines, A History by Johnny Hauer. Porcelain figurines are not new to modern society. In fact, some of the earliest examples come to us from ancient Greece. These first two are from the Benaki Museum in Athens. The first, a small clay pig, is from the 5th century BCE. It is only 3 inches in length and was intended to be a small child's toy. This next figurine was created in the Athenian workshop in the 2nd or 3rd century BCE. She's quite small, only 7 inches tall. These earliest examples were made of terracotta and mass-produced in molds. They were used as toys, but as we will see, figurines had many purposes that changed with the fashions and flags of nations. Some were used for religious purposes, as in the case of these haniwa from 6th century Japan. These terracotta figures were coil-built funerary objects buried with the dead starting in the 3rd century. Dehua porcelain figures originated in China's Fujian province and were referred to as blanc de chine in the West. They have been produced since the Ming Dynasty or 14th century and were incredibly popular in Europe. Later, they will be copied, as we will see, at the Meissen factory. Though imports had been occurring for many years, in the 17th century, Europe was obsessed with Chinese porcelain, particularly pure white biscuit, seen here. There was no way to reproduce the porcelain in Europe, as the technology was completely unknown at the time. The only way to acquire it was to purchase it from Asia, who enjoyed its monopoly on trade. The porcelain was so valuable and rare that France's Sun King Louis XIV melted down all the silverware at Versailles in order to finance his collection of imported Chinese porcelain, because the Chinese would only accept silver or gold as payment. The ruler of Saxony, Augustus the Strong, himself obsessed with porcelain and suffering from what he called a maladie du porcelain, called the alchemist Johann Friedrich Böttger to the capital Dresden in 1702 in order to decode the mysteries of Chinese porcelain and discover how it was made, in the hopes that European markets could cash in on porcelain's popularity. Porcelain was so sought after that looking for it was dubbed the search for white gold and was a popular subject of woodblock prints. Here are two of Böttger at work in his laboratory. It was also the subject of oil paintings. Here is one by Paul Kiesling with Böttger showing off his work to Augustus. And here he is depicted as the alchemist or magician he was believed to be. Böttger did not succeed right away, however. In fact, he failed miserably and even tried to escape to Vienna, but he was returned to his laboratory and imprisoned. It took him 5 years to figure out how to make red stoneware, called jaspis porcelain. Here we see a figure of Augustus the Strong made in Böttger's workshop of jaspis porcelain. And it was not until 1708 that the first white European porcelain was finally fired, with the discovery of kaolin as an additive. This is one of the first examples ever produced in Europe, and it comes from Böttger's workshop. This porcelain is classified as hard paste. It has a firing temperature of around 1400 degrees, and it is quite durable. Hard paste can take on characteristics of stoneware or earthenware, depending on which additives and firing methods are used. It is different than soft paste, which fires at only around 1200 degrees and is quite fragile. It should also be noted that hard paste can be used for unglazed biscuit porcelain as well. Now, the process for making figurines is slightly different from other ceramic processes. A clay model is first used to create a plaster mold. Porcelain liquid, called paste, is watered down, becoming slip, and it is then poured into the mold, creating the clay figurine. Once dry, the figurine is removed from the mold and then fired twice, like other ceramic processes. But after the paint is brushed on, it's often fired at a low temperature between paint applications for different effects. Augustus used this newly discovered formula and technique, which he kept a closely guarded secret, to establish the first European porcelain factory, which he called the Royal Polish and Electoral Saxon Porcelain Manufactory, otherwise and more famously known as Meissen, for the town in which the factory was built. The mark of the factory is crossed swords from the coat of arms of Saxony and was introduced in 1722. It's one of the oldest continuously used trademarks in the world. The first examples of porcelain created in Europe are Meissen porcelain, also called Meissen china or Dresden china, because of the factory's proximity to the capital city. The first figurines were of life-sized animals modeled after live specimens and produced in the 1730s for the Japanese palace in Dresden. They were all white as a display of the ability to produce fine porcelain. Later, Meissen moved on to colored specimens, such as this rhinoceros, which was modeled on an oral description, so it is a rather strange and not nearly as realistic as those with live models. One of the things Meissen is most famous for is its figurines and the styles it developed, such as these from the 18th century, influenced European figureware for centuries to come. In fact, the enamel paints used by Meissen then are the basis for ceramic paints we still use today. The idea for the figurines, oddly enough, came from sugar ornaments that were popular amongst the wealthy in Europe. Sugar was pressed into a form to create shapes of every kind, including animals, carriages, and people. They were coveted by the rich as a sign of wealth and designed to be eaten. The porcelain figures made by Meissen were displayed on tables rather than in cases as is popular today. This is evidenced by the wide bases and the accompanying candlesticks in some sets, or by these that feature a clock as well. The subject matter of the figurines spans everything from the mythological and satirical to the fanciful, and much like other art of the day, it was meant to showcase the scholarship of the owner. One of the more popular subjects was the Commedia dell'arte, a traveling theater from the 16th century Italy that featured a harlequin or clownish character who was always getting into trouble. However, it would not be long before others would want in on the profits, and factory workers were more than happy to sell the secret porcelain recipe to the highest bidder. Inspired by the Meissen porcelain movement was the Vienna Porcelain Manufactory, the second oldest porcelain factory in Europe, and founded in 1718. The figurines are still valued by collectors who cherish the whimsical scenes of the wealthy at play. The most coveted pieces from this factory, however, are those from the first 25 years of its establishment. The pieces are named Du Pauquier porcelain after their founder. They are very valuable, and most, like these, are found in museums. Now to be outdone or to be left out of the earnings, the French were soon to follow. The Sèvres factory, financed by King Louis XV and Madame du Pompadour, began producing its own porcelain, including figurines. Limoges, France, must be included as well, as fine producers of porcelain figurines then as now. Notice the duller finish on the surface. This is because the company used biscuit porcelain in their process to set themselves apart from competitors. The figurines of 18th century Europe are a special snapshot of art that embodied the frivolity and fun of Baroque and Rococo sensibilities that left as quickly as they came. They inspired generations of artistry that followed. They inspired Royal Copenhagen figurines, Staffordshire figurines, Hummel, Dresden lace, which is actual lace dipped in porcelain and then fired, Yardrow, Heron, Royal Crown Derby, even porcelain baby dolls, whose faces were sculpted using the biscuit firing process as well. The beautiful figurines today are all due to the ingenuity of Johann Böttger and a greedy king who wanted to pay wholesale prices for his porcelain addiction, proving that necessity is indeed the mother of invention. Thank you.